For 17 years, the smell of blood and incense was the smell of power. I was a master of my craft, commanding spirits my clients paid a fortune to unleash on their enemies. I could make a healthy man sick, a successful business crumble, a happy family tear itself apart. It was a dark and terrible gift, one I had spent my entire life perfecting. But on the night of March 15th, 2017, in the middle of my most powerful ritual, another presence entered the room, and the demons I had served for almost 2 decades, they didn't just flee, they vanished in absolute, undeniable terror. What could possibly scare a demon? I mean, really terrify them to the point where they cease to exist in a room. I had worked with these things my whole life. I thought I knew what real power looked like, what true fear felt like. I was wrong. In this story, I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw that night. If this is something you feel you need to hear, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button so more people can find this message. And let me ask you this in the comments. Have you ever felt a spiritual presence you just couldn't explain? That moment on the cold floor of my ritual room was the end of a 17-year career in darkness. It was the night my entire world was shattered by a light and a voice that I was not prepared for. I promise to tell you exactly what happened, and I will. You're going to witness the full encounter and understand the absolute authority of Jesus Christ over any darkness. But for you to truly grasp the weight of that night, for you to feel the shock that I felt, you need to understand the world I came from. Let's go back to the very beginning. My story doesn't start with me finding some old spell book in an attic. I was born into this. My home, high in the Andean mountains, wasn't a place for family dinners. It was a spiritual clinic. The air was always heavy with strange incense and the low, desperate murmurs of clients waiting to see my father. He was the doctor, a warlock feared and respected by everyone. While other kids learned to read storybooks, my father taught me to read omens in smoke and ash. My toys weren't cars and soldiers, they were ritual daggers and bundles of dried herbs. This world was my inheritance, and all I ever wanted was for my father to look at me with pride. His love wasn't given freely, it had to be earned. It was measured by my aptitude for the dark arts. I remember watching him, a powerful man commanding unseen forces, and I just felt so small, so insignificant. I didn't crave the power for its own sake, not at first. I craved it because it was the only language he understood. If I could be powerful like him, maybe then he would finally see me. That hollowness inside, that desperate need for a father's approval, was the real altar I sacrificed my soul on. My first real test came when I was a teenager. He finally let me assist in a binding ritual. I felt the energy in the room respond to my voice, a cold, electric feeling that was both terrifying and intoxicating. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of respect in his eyes. That was the moment I was truly hooked. When he eventually passed away, I inherited it all, his tools, his books, and the spirits bound to our bloodline. But I refused to live in his shadow. I moved to the city, to Quito, determined to build an empire of my own. In Quito, I didn't want to be my father's son. I wanted to be the master. I set up my practice in a luxury apartment, swapping the mountain air for the scent of money and ambition. My clients weren't farmers worried about crops. They were politicians who needed rivals silenced and CEOs who wanted competitors ruined. My first major contract paid me $50,000 to bankrupt a thriving construction firm. I remember the ritual, the cold marble floor against my knees, the smell of imported cigars from my client mixed with the acrid smoke of the curse. It worked. The power was intoxicating. That success opened doors to a darker world. The requests became more personal, more destructive. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about breaking marriages, inflicting sickness, shattering minds. To deliver those results, I had to go deeper. The simple offerings of my father's practice weren't enough. I made pacts that required blood, not just from animals, and bound more powerful, more malevolent entities to my service. Each new level of power felt like a victory, but it was really just a thicker chain being wrapped around my soul. I was no longer just a warlock. I was a weapon for hire. But the power came with a price I hadn't seen in the contract. Sleep stopped being a refuge. Every night the spirits I commanded chased me through dark corridors, their whispers promising my soul would eventually be theirs. I started seeing shadows moving in my peripheral vision when I was awake. People on the street flinched away from me, their eyes wide with a fear they couldn't explain. I'd look in the mirror and see a stranger staring back, his eyes holding a coldness that wasn't mine. I was terrified, but I told myself it was simply the cost of greatness. I reached the peak of my career after orchestrating the downfall of a prominent political figure, The payment was astronomical, enough to live in luxury for the rest of my life. My name was spoken in hushed, fearful tones in the most powerful circles in the country. I had it all: the power, the money, the reputation that eclipsed my father's legacy. But I had never been more alone. The spirits were no longer satisfied with the usual offerings. They were whispering about a final permanent sacrifice. I had ignored every warning sign, and now I could feel it. The bill was coming due. That massive payment should have been a victory lap, the moment I finally proved I was greater than my father. But as I looked at the bank confirmation on my screen, a number with more zeros than I'd ever seen, I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. The power was hollow. My family had long since stopped calling. My sister once told me, her voice trembling over the phone, "I don't know who you are anymore, Joaquin. There's a darkness in your voice." I had dismissed her as weak. Now, in my silent, expensive apartment, I realized she was right. I had no friends, only clients who feared me. The physical price was getting steeper every day. I suffered from migraines that felt like a nail being driven into my skull, and a chronic exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. But sleep was the last thing I wanted. Every night was a war. I'd wake up paralyzed, a heavy weight on my chest, whispering old incantations and threats into my ear. The worst was the mirror. One morning, while shaving, my reflection smiled back at me, but my own face hadn't moved. Its eyes weren't mine. They were ancient, cold, and they were mocking me. I tried to quit. 3 separate times I tried to walk away. The first time I simply refused new clients for a week. That night, every glass object in my apartment shattered simultaneously. The second time, I threw away some of my ritual tools. The response was a sudden, debilitating illness that put me in the hospital for days with doctors baffled. The final time, I tried to pray to whatever God might be listening, and the lead entity I served appeared in my room. It didn't speak in words, but it made its threat perfectly clear. My life and my soul were its property now. So there I was, at the absolute bottom. I was sitting on the floor of my multi-million-dollar apartment in Quito, physically sick and spiritually owned. I had lost my family, my health, and any shred of my own humanity. I had tried to escape 3 times, and each attempt was met with brutal retaliation, proving I had no control left. I was a prisoner in a life I had built, a slave to the very power I craved. Utterly hopeless, I accepted a new contract. It was just another job, another ritual. I had no idea it would be my last. Yet, that next contract came on March 15th, 2017. It was the second night of a 3-night ritual to destroy a man's business. I prepared the room meticulously. The cold marble floor was covered in sigils drawn with salt and ash. Altars held bowls of animal blood, and the air was thick with the smoke of expensive, acrid incense. I began the chants, my voice echoing in the silent apartment. I felt them arrive, the familiar cold presences of the spirits I commanded, gathering around me like predators. The ritual was working perfectly. The power in the room was reaching its peak. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. It wasn't the familiar cold of the spirits. This was an absolute, authoritative cold that froze the air in my lungs and extinguished all heat. In an instant, every one of the dozens of candles in the room was snuffed out, as if by a great silent wind. The darkness was total, but only for a second. A light began to grow from the doorway. It wasn't a light bulb. It was a living, brilliant light that was a source in itself, and the demonic entities I had summoned, they were just gone, not fled, erased. In the center of the light stood a man. His face was too bright to see, but I knew who he was. The oppressive spiritual hum that was the soundtrack to my life was replaced by a profound, deafening silence. The world just stopped. Then a voice spoke. It didn't hit my ears. It resonated directly in my soul in my native Spanish with the authority of a king and the heartbreak of a father. It said just 2 words. Ven a mí. Come to me. Those 2 words were not a request. They were a command from the creator of the universe, and they carried the weight of all eternity. My legs completely gave out from under me. I collapsed onto the floor, not from fear, but from a sudden, unbearable agony. In that instant, in his presence, the full weight of every evil thing I had ever done crashed down on me. I saw every life I had ruined, felt every bit of pain I had caused. It was the agony of my own filth being exposed to perfect holiness. I just lay there on the cold marble, a broken, sobbing mess. I wasn't a warlock anymore. I was just a lost son, finally found by his father. I wept for hours. When I finally came to, the room was pitch black and silent. The presence was gone, but the air was clean for the first time in my life. The first thing I noticed was the smell. The incense, the blood, the offerings. It all reeked of rot and decay, like a tomb that had been sealed for a century. The power I had served was revealed for what it was, death. Shaking, I knew my life was over, and a new one had just begun. If this story is touching something in your heart, please like this video and share your own experience in the comments. I want to walk you through exactly what I understood in those first moments and days, because this is the heart of it all. Before that night, I saw the spiritual world as a place of negotiation, a marketplace. You make an offering, you get a favor. You bind a spirit, it serves you. I saw demonic entities as powerful, ancient beings you had to respect and fear. But when Jesus stood in that room, I saw the truth. They weren't powerful, they were cowards. They didn't flee because they were scared of a fight. They ceased to exist in his presence. His light didn't just scatter the darkness, it unmade it. When I finally got to my feet, hours later, the first thing that hit me was the smell. The incense, the blood, the herbs I'd spent a fortune on. It all reeked of a tomb. It was the smell of rot, of decay, of death itself. The power I had worshipped was a lie. Shaking, I spent the entire next day gathering everything. Every book, every idol, every ritual dagger. I built a massive fire in my backyard and threw it all in. With every cursed object that turned to ash, I felt a literal physical weight lifting off my shoulders. I was free, but I was also empty, a ghost wandering the streets of Quito with no idea what to do next. The ultimate revelation was this. The power I served for 17 years was nothing more than a cheap imitation, a shadow trying to mimic the light. The demons I commanded weren't kings. They were squatters who fled the moment the true owner of the house showed up. My entire life, my father's entire legacy, was built on a lie. I had been a slave who thought he was a master. That understanding changed everything, but I would soon learn that being set free was only the first step. My old masters were furious they had lost their property, and the real battle for my soul was just beginning. Burning my past was a declaration of war. I thought I was free, but I had just broken a contract with hell, and my former masters were furious. My old life didn't just fade away. A few days later, one of my most powerful former clients called. His voice on the phone was like ice. "You made a mistake, Joaquin," he said. "The spirits are not pleased, and neither are we." That night, the real retaliation began. The whispers returned, not as temptations, but as promises of torment. The shadows in my apartment weren't just fleeting glimpses anymore. They were solid forms of malice. The nights became a living hell. I wasn't just having nightmares, I was being dragged back into the rituals, forced to watch myself perform the evil I had renounced. I'd wake up screaming, the phantom smell of sulfur and blood thick in my room. The whispers were relentless, trying to break me. "This is too hard," they would hiss in my ear. "You were a king with us, now you are nothing. Come back." And in those moments, lying paralyzed in a cold sweat, the temptation to reclaim that familiar destructive power was almost unbearable. I was completely alone and terrified. I knew I couldn't win this fight by myself. I found that small church in South Quito and confessed everything to the pastor, a man named Don Mercedes. He wasn't shocked and he wasn't afraid. For 6 months, he walked through the fire with me. It wasn't a single prayer and it was over. It was a daily grinding war fought with fasting, with scripture, and with learning to use the name of Jesus not as a magic spell, but as the ultimate authority. I had relapses into crippling fear, days I was too scared to leave my bed, convinced I'd made a mistake, but he kept showing up. So that was the battle after the encounter. First, there were the human threats from my old life, which I overcame by cutting all ties and trusting in a protection I couldn't see. Second, the direct spiritual torment, which was only broken through that grueling 6-month process of deliverance. And third, the psychological temptation to return, which I fought by immersing myself in my new church family. That intense war for my soul, for my very sanity, lasted for 6 solid months. Every day was a fight, but with each small victory, the darkness lost a little more of its grip. That long 6-month war is now years in the past. The man who lived in constant terror, the warlock feared by the powerful, is gone. I used to be terrified of the spirits I commanded, jumping at every shadow, never knowing a single night of real rest. The migraines, the sickness, that was my normal. Today the world might see me as a simple man, but for the first time in my life, I know what peace feels like. I can sleep through the night. I'm not afraid of the dark or of death, because I have met the one who defeated both. My hands, which once mixed potions and drew sigils to destroy families and ruin businesses, are now used for something else entirely. I work with my church, helping men who are lost in addiction and crime. I don't have the fancy apartment or the big bank account anymore, but when I pray for someone and see hope return to their eyes, I feel a richness that $50,000 contracts could never buy. I traded a power that took everything from people for a purpose that gives back. I traded a kingdom of ash for a chance to build something that lasts. I was once the most alone person I knew, surrounded by clients who feared me and spirits who owned me. Today, I have a true family. Pastor Don Mercedes is like a father to me, and the people at my church love me for who I am, not for what I can do. My relationship with my sister, that's still healing. The darkness I brought into her life left deep wounds, and some scars don't fade overnight. I still have moments where a shadow looks too real, or a whisper of the old pride tries to creep back in. The battle is over, but the war has left its mark. So, my health was restored. My sanity was given back to me. I lost a fortune but found a family. The price I paid for my old life was my soul, and the price Jesus paid to buy it back was his own life. My life today is simple, it's quiet, and it's real. Some of the losses, like the trust of my family, are things I work to rebuild every single day. But these scars I carry are not a sign of defeat. They are a testimony to the God who is real, who is alive, and who will step into any darkness to pull you out. You've seen how my life was rebuilt from the ashes. I went from a slave who thought he was a king to a son of the true king. My message for you today is simple. Jesus Christ is not just a story in a book or a distant historical figure. He is real. He is alive. He is a living God who will personally step into the darkest, most forbidden places on this earth to rescue a single lost soul. I know this is true because he stepped into my ritual room to rescue me. He is not afraid of your darkness. Maybe you're listening to this, and you're chasing power just like I was. You think it will bring you respect, control, or fill that emptiness inside. To you, I say this. The power you're serving is a chain, not a crown. The master you follow is a liar who promises you a kingdom but gives you a prison of fear and isolation. I know the constant terror you live with. I know the coldness in your soul. I know because I lived it every single day for 17 years. That path only leads to destruction. But I am living proof that there is another way. There is a real king, and his power isn't a chain. It's freedom. He doesn't demand your soul. He died to buy it back. If you are trapped, if you feel there is no way out, I need you to hear me. He met me at my absolute worst, in the middle of a demonic ritual. He will meet you right where you are, in your addiction, in your secret, in your despair. You don't need an altar or an offering. Just call on his name. If this message has reached your heart, please subscribe and turn on notifications for more testimonies of God's power. Like this video so the message can spread, and share it with someone who needs to know they are not too far gone. Comment below if you need prayer. We are a family here. I spent 17 years serving masters who vanished in terror at the mere presence of the light. Today I serve the light himself, and I have finally found what true power feels like. It feels like peace.